All right, we are back again with Doug and TJ to do an FSU preview. Welcome back to the Big Mountain.
Thanks for having us, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, always a good time. Appreciate the work you guys do, and so honored to be here.
Well, we're excited. Talk some Seminole football here. And we're going to let you guys kind of give us the lowdown on what's going to happen this year. Tell us, maybe the good, the bad, and well, we just don't know. But let's start with the offense here. Bringing in a new quarterback here from Boston College. I would love to hear you guys take on the quarterback, but just everybody here on the offense. We know last time we talked to you guys, the wide receiver room was questionable. We saw that still to be questionable, kind of where we're going at that in 2025. Where are we at here with the offense? Let's go, TJ. Let's start with you. We'll let Doug start with the defense.
Yeah, so offense started, last year with maybe the best drive we've ever seen, and then from there, like fell off a cliff. We were all, Doug was out there too. Yeah, we were all enjoying all that Guinness that we had prior to the game, and then the rest of the season happened, unfortunately. I think the offense will have taken a small step everywhere, right? And that's the biggest thing to me is I don't think they brought in any one person, offense or defense, not to get onto that too much, but I don't think they brought in any one person that's just like, oh, well, here's your Cam Newton that's just going to take over and make it. But if they can just get a little bit better at every position, which I think they absolutely have, and some positions more than others. I think the offensive line, they've improved drastically. I think that was the worst, as bad as quarterback play was. I think the offensive line ranked in like the 110s from a PFF perspective. And so, I mean, when you can give DJ all the grief you want, or the freshman quarterback all the grief you want, but man, when you're that bad at blocking up front, then none of the rest of it really matters. So I think they'll take incremental steps, varying degrees at every position. I think wide receivers gotten better. I think quarterbacks gotten better. I think running backs gotten better. Offensive line's gotten significantly better. I hope, kind of knock on wood, this early in fall camp. But I think that they'll take small steps everywhere. But offensive line, again, if you're in the 110s, man, if you can just get that to be a top 50 unit, right? Like if you can be solidly in the top half in the ACC, you're going to win a lot more football games. And that it all started up front last year, and not that anything else was great, but to me, as excited as I am to see Castellanos run around and make highlight plays and do prolific things that he did to Florida State for 2 years straight, if you can't block anybody, none of that even matters. So I am excited a lot for the offensive line, and I think that's where you'll see the biggest improvement.
To play off what TJ said, small incremental steps. We don't need to be a juggernaut on offense. That's not what we're designed to do. Gus Malzahn doesn't want to throw the ball and score 45 points a game. We're not necessarily needing a massive turnaround, but for those who keep throwing 2 and 10 in our face, you have to understand this is a completely new team. There are a handful. I think, I can count starters on one hand that returned from last year's team. So this is a completely new program, and it's going to be fascinating to see how those pieces fit together. But what gives me the confidence in feeling good about how the season's going to start is it comes back to Gus Malzahn and Tommy Castellanos. They wanted to be together at UCF. Tommy wanted to come to Florida State. He was a lifelong Florida State fan. We told him he was an athlete, not a quarterback. Gus saw something in his system that could utilize Tommy's skills, and then they did very well at UCF. Then he transferred over to Boston College. That was the toughest team that the 2023 Florida State team faced all year long until the ACC championship. We were looking around going, oh, this is the guy that we said couldn't be quarterback, and he has us on our backs and on our heels in the fourth quarter. So as we come back together at Florida State with Gus Malzahn and with Tommy and that revamped offensive line that TJ mentioned, I really think that you throw in Squirrel Wright and Deuce Robinson into the wide receiver mix. You've got some good bodies, and there's a chance that this Florida State offense could be competent. Again, that's the level we're looking for. Competent. We don't need stellar. We're not Bama. We're not Georgia. We're not, DJ Lagway and that band of receivers back there. We'll talk about the defense and why that matters in a moment. But all we need Florida State to do is be average, and they'll be twice as good as they were last year.
Awesome. I got a couple follow-up questions on things that you guys just talked about regarding the offense. So I'm gonna give them both to you. Just tee up a double hitter for you here. So first of all, Gus Malzahn coming in. Do you guys expect this to be the normal Malzahn offense, running 50, 60 times a game or whatever he likes to do? Or do you think they will try and be a little bit more balanced there? And then my other question is, you guys talked about the O-line. Do you think you said there should be improvement this year? Do you think this a Malzahn run heavy offense with an athletic quarterback that can move? Do you think both of those things? How do you think they will benefit the offensive line? I mean, they always say it's easier to run block than pass block. So I just wanted both of your thoughts on those two topics.
So that's what we're hopeful that we will see from this Gus Malzahn offense. And truthfully, Mike needs it. Mike Norvell brought Gus Malzahn in to say, I just threw a turd on the field and I want to remain employed. I want you to come in and do what you do. The only thing that Gus Malzahn has been really good at for the last 20 years is a run heavy offense. And then you pair that with a quarterback that admittedly is not a pocket passer. I fully expect that to be the case. There's some great FSU guys that did a breakdown X's and O's on why there was such a big drop off from Tommy Castellanos from 2023 to 2024. And it was something as simple as screen passes not being designed to go out, but being designed to go in the Bill O'Brien offense. Tommy is not a pocket passer. A simple change like that derailed the few offensive strengths that he had. So we want Gus Malzahn to come in here and, yes, put it in the backs of Osman Kroma, the everything freshman running back that we hope we have. Put it in the hands of Roydell Williams, the transfer from Alabama. Those two, if they can run the ball for 25, 30 carries and get enough first downs to keep the Bama offense off the field, there's a snowball's chance and heck that we can actually pull off the upset in October or August 30th.
Yeah, on the offensive line, and I agree with what Doug's saying. Like, I think they want that to be their identity. I think that's, that's the most surefire way for them to have success. Dropping Tommy back 40 plus 50 times a game, that's not going to win you a lot of games. Could it get you one or two? Sure. But yeah, I think they want that to be their identity. On the offensive line specifically, yeah, you're right. Like, it is easier to run block. It's more of a straightforward assignment. You're not worried about twists and stunts and different things the defenses do. You have a man, and if the guy if you make a hole and he hits the hole, your job is essentially done, right? You've got 3 seconds and you're out. So I do think that, and I think that fits more to their strengths. You look at some of the guys they brought in. Adrian Medley came over with Herb Hand and Gus from UCF. They were a very run heavy team. That's the system that he's been implemented in. Wake Forest, they brought in Luke Pettibon, not a prolific offense, really running or passing, but not a pass heavy attack. Like he's a really good center, all ACC type kid that I think can be really good run blocking. I think Richie Leonard excels in that kind of run heavy offense. And he was at UF 2 years ago. And that's what their offense looked like with Graham Mertz's, having his first year at UF. The other two SEC tackles, both Gunner and Pettibon coming in. I think that's where their strengths are. I think you're exactly right. That's what's easier of the two, to run block or pass block. And so, yeah, I think that you want to play to your strengths, right? And so you've got a mobile quarterback, you've got running backs that you have some confidence in, you've got an offensive line that does it better than that, and you got a coach that wants to run the dang ball, right? So I think that for all those reasons, yeah, I mean, they've said that the split's going to be 60-40. It wouldn't surprise me at all if it's more than that. But the caveat to all of it is how successful you are and what the scores of games are. You go down 14-0 to Bama early in the game, you're going to have to abandon that pretty quick, right? And if your defense can't hold up, which we'll get to, I guess, in a second. But I think, the way that games are flowing is obviously going to dictate that too.
Sure. Well, let's get to some defensive side of the ball here. Doug, we'll start with you. Maybe the strength of the team coming into 2025. Where are you at here with the defense?
For me, I really need to start with Daryl Jackson, seeing what he does on the defensive line. We've been hearing about him for 2 years. He was very highly heralded, transfer out of Miami. We had to have a tug of war with them to keep him. He is an NFL prototype defensive lineman that should be able to dominate. The question is, will he? And that's where I have a hangover from last year's team. We were in most of the games in the first half. The question was why and what happened to those players when we just quit at halftime. The halftime changes did not take place. We were already playing from behind in just about every game. And there was a character issue with a few players who we retained that tried to stand out, that tried to make film for themselves. But at the end of the day, it was three one-person players on defense, not a cohesive unit. So we've rebuilt the entire defensive line. We've got a lot of guys coming in, transfers, but Daryl Jackson is one of those ones that wasn't a transfer. And that's going to be the question is, can he take the form that we hope he can take in the new system with Tony White? Now, 3-3-5, we're all very curious about it. We've done some research. We've seen some of it. And I think that it does play into some of the strengths that FSU has. And it also plays into the needed strength of surprising some offenses with not knowing where the blitz is coming from, not knowing who to stand up and block. I think that's going to be an asset to a team that's all new. There's no film on, there's no real application to how his Nebraska defense is going to use these players. And I think that's going to be something that really comes up for Omar Graham Jr., Shaheem Brown. These are players that were good players, highly recruited players, but they just couldn't carry the entire load last year. And they didn't give up. They came back. They saw what was being transitioned to in the new defense. And they said, that is a system I think that I want to come into and play. And Florida State is DBU. I don't care what LSU says. The question is, can those new younger backs step up and make the interceptions? Mike Norvell came out after the first scrimmage, and I want to make a point about that when I conclude this statement. But he came out very strongly against those defensive backs, saying, look, we're not pass breakup university. We're not PBUU. We are DBU. We want you to be making those plays, making those interceptions. But to that point with the scrimmage, that's where you have to remember nobody can forecast what's going to happen, because when those 22 players took the field in that scrimmage the other day, it was the first time, not even in spring ball, the first time that those 22 players played together as one unit, 11 on 11. And how much can they gel in the next 20 practice days?
Yeah, I mean, Doug's right. Like it's the same thing as the offense to me, not to use the same answer, but if you don't have it up front, man, it's hard to imagine. And you could have 4 Deion Sanders back there in the secondary. And if you can't get any pass rush or you can't stop the run, it doesn't matter. I really like their defensive backs. I think they brought in Jeremiah Wilson is easily cornerback 1, and he comes in from Houston. I think he was at Syracuse before that. I love him. I think they've got a ton of talent at cornerbacks with Jabril Rawls and Shamar Arnaud came in as a true freshman that I think will get burned this year, and Quindarius Jones. And there's a ton of talent back there, but it all kind of starts and ends up front. I have some concerns around their ability to rush the passer. I don't, we've been spoiled with the likes of Jermaine Johnson and Jared Verse and Keir Thomas. And then you go back further than that, and you've got Brian Burns and DeMarcus Walker and different guys. We have been spoiled with a plethora of riches of pass rushers. I don't know if that guy is on the roster right now. I think they kind of similar to the offensive line. I think they will be very good against the run. Or better against the run. But I wonder about the pass rushing. Does somebody emerge? The James Williams kid that transferred in from Nebraska with Tony White and Terrence Knighton, does Diggs or somebody else kind of emerge as that guy? That would be the concern I have is the pass rush. But man, it does. It all starts and ends with Jackson up front. And then really to maybe even compound on that a lot, I don't expect Jackson to play, in a 3-3-5. I don't expect him to play 80 snaps a game getting double teamed. What does the depth look like behind him, right? Well, what can they bring off the bench to spell him? And again, Florida State's had kind of an embarrassment of riches at the defensive line for a long time. And, you think about how fresh those 23 guys were because they had good depth. And all year we were able to rotate guys. So the defensive line, I think it will be improved. Again, hard to say that any positions won't be improved year over year from last year. But I do wonder about the depth at defensive line. Like if I don't know if the question was about a concern or not, but I guess I'm giving one. The depth at D line is a big concern for me going into the season. But we'll find out pretty early what that looks like, right? That concern will either be quenched or realized week 1.
Okay. Let me add one quick thing onto what TJ said also about depth. That's something that's been rattling around in my brain kind of this offseason after we've seen the fallout from the transfer portal. And again, count me among the people that say things have to change with the transfer portal. But so long as it stays under the current rules and where we are today, what I can confidently and definitively say is the era of dynasty football is over. because you don't get to stack these players 2 and 3 deep like the teams of the past. Yes, you take your 5-star starting defensive lineman out, you fill them with a true freshman 5-star or a sophomore 5-star defensive lineman that you're grooming to be a starter the following year. With the way the transfer portal and then NIL has played out, anybody that has any talent is not going to sit as your highly touted backup and reserve anymore. They're going to go, even if it's to a smaller school, to be the starter so they can get their tape out there and get their experience out there because they want to be drafted too. And that's something that I think is just going to be a big difference for the next 10 years, unless there are some dramatic changes. And finally, putting a point on what TJ was saying also about the pass rusher, Jason Jenkins was somebody that we thought would be injured and might be out for Bama, or might be the second or third game before he was playing. He's participated in the scrimmages and they're saying he's a full go, maybe not 100%, but that is the key for me in the Alabama game 1. If Jason Jenkins is in there, if he's starting, and if he's successfully getting pressure, I think this is going to be a very fun and interesting game. If he cannot, if we're relying on some of our holdovers from last year, or if we're just not getting any pressure, then it's going to be a long afternoon.
Awesome, Doug. Well, your comment there on the transfer portal is like the perfect segue into the follow-up question I wanted to ask. So you guys used words. You talked about character of some of the guys last year. You talked about talent. You talked about depth. So I want to ask you about the makeup of this team. What should we expect to see? 18 months ago, everyone was hailing, myself included, probably some, multiple people in this conversation. Mike Norvell is kind of the king of the transfer portal. I mean, 23, he knocked it out of the park. I mean, he was batting, if he wasn't batting 1,000, it was close. Last year, some of those transfer portal guys didn't work out. So what is your expectation this year for the guys doing most of the work? Do you expect it to be mostly transfer players? Do you expect, the high school talent that's been recruited the last couple of years, are those guys starting to bubble up to the top? And then just overall comments on what that does to the character of the team, that mix, whatever mix you expect. Does it change things? Does it make things more unpredictable if you're relying on transfer players a lot?
Yeah, I think the breakdown, you think about offense. Your top 2 wide receivers are transfers. Your top running back, unless the true freshman takes over, top 2 running backs are transfers. Your quarterback's a transfer, and all 5 offensive linemen are transfers, right? So your tight end is going to be a homegrown guy in Landon Thomas. But yeah, so you got a lot on that side. Defense is a little bit less. Your linebackers, you probably have 1 or 2 that are, not transfers. Darrell Jackson is a transfer, but it's his 3rd year in the system, so I won't count him. Secondary is mostly, outside of Jeremiah Wilson, secondary is mostly homegrown. But yeah, it's more, some of your depth pieces are some of your younger guys that maybe aren't transfers, but a lot of your team is portal, right? I don't know what the exact percentage is, but I'd say if your starters, you're probably looking at, I don't know what I just rattle off, like 75, 80%, maybe, there's a good number. I think there's good and bad. I'll give a very political answer here. The good is that they all signed up for a team that went 2-10 last year. Nobody's going to be surprised, right? Everybody that was on that team last year was signing up for a 13-0 team, yes, right? Yeah. And this year, they know what they got themselves into. And so they know where Florida State should be and where they are, if we can just call a spade, right? So I think that's good. They're just not going to be like week 2 and you're like, man, how, or you lose to Bama by 14 or 17, whatever. And oh man, how did that happen? Well, you kind of knew what you were walking into, right? So I think that's good. The bad, or maybe the negative side of it, is that if things do start to go sideways, how much buy-in is there in this, not just for Florida State, but really for anywhere that really uses the portal heavily, LSU, Ole Miss, Colorado, wherever. When it starts to go sideways, say you start out 2-3 or 2-4, something not great, right? Is there still that same buy-in? Because it's easy to buy in fall camp. It's easy to buy in right now, or if you play close, whether you win or lose to Bama, right? Like all that buy-in is still there. But I think the good is, again, you signed up, you knew what you were getting into. The bad is if things start to go off the rails again, does this mercenary culture that I'm not even blaming Florida State for, just college football in general that we kind of have, does that buy-in still exist? So, again, the answer to that is we'll find out, right? But yeah. I think that's where it can go really, really well, really, really bad. Maybe I'm just more of a positive guy in general. I lean to think that it's going to be more of the positive. Again, things go sideways. I mean, you knew what you signed up for, right? Like, and you still want to kind of do the right things. I would think that the coaching staff has done a better job of evaluating that character as much as you can, in that truncated portal window. So I skew a little bit more towards the positive. But if the results aren't there, I mean, go to a job and get beat down every day and see how long you last or see how long your buy-in's there, right? We would do the same thing as adults. So I certainly don't blame 18 to 22-year-olds that quit as well, right? Half the fans quit on the team and didn't show up at the end of the year. So I understand what the kids do too. So Doug, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that too, but that's kind of how I take it away.
Yeah, I've got a slightly more cynical perspective. And let me start off by saying, have not played a down of organized football in my life. Mad respect to all of those who are out there sweating and putting in the work and doing it. But that brings me to the point, which is these guys play on 7-and-7 teams. These guys play on high school teams. These guys play on, practice squads. These guys move around. If you're a professional, if you're a high caliber athlete, we have this nostalgia about Friday Night Lights and that high school state championship of these guys that were together since they were in 8th grade and forged in brotherhood and fire and coming together. And I don't think that is where the modern football era is going or really is today. They are accustomed to switching in and out. They're accustomed to playing their role. Now, don't get me wrong, on the line, you have to communicate, you have to know your assignments, but that comes down to leadership. And that's where I'm going to be a little bit more direct than what TJ said. What Florida State lacked last year was leadership. No one jerking the collar and no one grabbing the scruff of their neck saying, you've got to do this and you've got to do better. And so when there was adversity, you didn't have that cohesive family bond and structure. But it doesn't take 4 years to develop that bond and that structure. Look at the Clemson pregame speech from Jameis Winston, 4th game of the season. I mean, that was a pregame speech for the ages. He's a redshirt freshman, but he's still a freshman out there telling 21 other future NFL draft picks how they need to behave. So it does not require 3-4 years of playing together to put together a solid effort. It takes leadership from a few vocal players that we didn't have last year and that we do have this year. I do believe this team is a better character team. And even the coaches have said it. They haven't been shy about mentioning they haven't really had to work on any team building efforts this year like they tried last year. And sadly, they didn't succeed in their team building efforts last year, not the least of which was building a team. So I do think that Mike can succeed. I think Mike has proven he can succeed. And when you look at the players that he's brought in and who has come through Florida State in the last 5 years, yeah, that 13-0 season was a lot of transfers and it can be done again.
Well, you guys just made some great points there, coming at it from maybe two slightly different angles. I want to get to hear from you both your biggest strength of this team, your biggest weakness, and then also got to get to your predictions. But before we get to that, I want to hear about coaching here, right? So we talked a little bit earlier. I think it was TJ that just mentioned gel. Like, how well are they going to gel? I'm wearing a UNLV shirt right now. That is my biggest question with UNLV, right? Like, they brought in all these transfers, new coach Mullen, and are making all these headlines. We like to think they're going to be good, but are they going to gel? And nobody knows. And I think that's what makes it a little bit more difficult to talk about these predictions with this transfer portal. What you said there, TJ, you mentioned buy-in. Like, do they just, after 4 games are like, man, we're 2-2, and this isn't what I thought it was going to be. So I'm not as bought in. And I wrote down here, and then you mentioned it here, Doug, character, right? And we see the NFL when they're drafting these players, character is a big deal. It's not just what are your stats, but your character and the player and the person that you are does matter, because you have to be coachable, usually, unless you're some crazy rock star. Even that gets you in trouble these days. But be that as it may, I want to come back and just say, with all of this that you've talked about, you mentioned Coach Norvell. I would just love to hear where you're at. We talked to you guys last year. Everybody was high on the hog, and rightfully so, and we're go, 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 and Norvell's the greatest coach ever. And, this year's a little different. I'm not saying he's not a great coach, but I'd love to hear from you guys on a year later, where are you at here with coach? I'm not saying he's on the hot seat, just kind of like, what are your expectations for him this year? And is he on the hot seat? I see Doug. They're like, what's going on with the coaching there? Let's start with you, Doug.
So with respect to the temperature under Coach Norvell's seat, I'm here representing some boosters and the booster perspective. We are indebted to him for 13-0. We're indebted to him for the recovery, but there is the narrative that only 2 out of the 5 seasons have been winning seasons. Now, I personally will grant him a lot of grace in taking over the job just before COVID hit. And so I'm willing to grant him a little bit more of a grace period than some others will. But 2-10 cannot be erased from the record.
Yeah.
And granted, we know what the issues were, whether it was a misread of DJU or the injury was more significant than we thought, and 0 competent, capable backups. We did not have a quarterback last year. We obviously recruited some linemen. Those linemen did not pan out. There was not good coaching. So Mike Norvell has done the hard work of swallowing his pride, bringing in a former head coach, granted a friend of his, to say, here is the offense. Here is everything that needs to be done. I'm going to step into what I presume is an uncomfortable position of being the CEO. All good entrepreneurs need to continue to grow and learn and take the next step. Mike is taking the next step. If there is success this year, then one of the problems with that success is how much credit does Gus get for that success? Can Mike, as the CEO, step back and say, honestly and realistically, it was because of my decision and my participation and my relationship with Gus, together we worked out. And that would be great. That would be great if there is such success. But the bottom line is 2-10 doesn't go away if you go to 6-6 this year, if you go to 7-5 this year. I set my floor for acceptance of a quality job at 8 wins. And the question is, how much further beyond those 8 wins can we get? And that's, for me, why Alabama is such a big game. Now, we'll talk about predictions in a moment. I'll save that statement for the prediction section. But Mike Norvell, to keep the temperature low under his seat, needs to see 8 wins this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's enough. I think that, like if they were to, I think if he was to go under 6-6, he would get fired, is my personal opinion. And I think 6-6 is a little bit gray. I always get people that ask about bowl games. I'm like, coaching decisions always happen before bowl games. I don't know why. Yeah. So I don't think that matters. But 6-6 is a little bit of a gray area. 7-5, I think he's relatively safe. If those 5 losses are all awful blowout, maybe there'd be some talk there. But I think 7-5 would probably get him at least he's got a big buyout still. So it would at least kick the can down the road a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think what's tough is I don't think he's a bad coach, right? And you're right. We were all singing his praises. We were talking off air a little bit. Like everybody in the world had him in their top 5 coaches last year at this time. Like nobody had him. I mean, Saban was singing his praises and everybody had him in their top 5. I'm not talking FSU fans. I'm talking everybody that works at the 4-letter network and Fox and CBS and everywhere had him in their top. And so, I mean, he didn't just forget how to coach football, right? Like he didn't forget how to motivate people. I mean, last year was the biggest train wreck that you could ever imagine. Every single thing that went wrong did. Ultimately, he wears that. And there's a bit of a concern of like, how did you not see this coming? Because they didn't. They had no clue. Like, I don't think he thought they were going back to the playoff by any means. But I do think that he thought this is going to be a pretty good team, right? We're gonna compete with everybody out here. And for them to misevaluate and really struggle to get the right guys in through the portal, like they had done so well in the past, I mean, I do think that's it's a massive red flag. And so, yeah, I mean, they would have to. Doug's right. Like 6-6 is not going to erase the taste of that. Now, I don't even know that 9-3 erases the taste. I think you'd have to put together because what's the you go 9-3 this year. Are we going 3-9 the next year? Are we going 4? Is it going to be this roller coaster of up and down and up and down? And so I think that he would probably need to put together a couple of good years in a row for people to say, okay, that was the anomaly, right? You won 3 games, 5 games, 10 games, 13, 2. Yes, we understand. But then you went 8 wins, 9 wins, 10 wins, 9 wins, 8 wins, 10 wins, 12 wins, right? Like if you could put together a string and show that that was the anomaly. But I mean, that's a prove it thing, right? Like that's a, hey, you got to show it to me. I think 2-10 though, it is so unforgivable, right? Like yeah, at a place like Florida State, right? You just like that just can't happen, right? Like I don't mean to harp on last year, but that's just not. I mean, we've seen bad years. We've seen Miami go 5-7. We've seen Florida win 4 games in a year, but to win 2 is just unimaginable in the
One
ACC.
of those wins against Cal was losable.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
they could have lost to Cal.
If Cal could make a field goal, they lost that too. I mean, Florida won 4 and 5 a couple of times again, and I hate to prop up the ACC, but did it against SEC type competition. I mean, you won 2 games in the ACC, right? And one of those being against literally the worst FCS program. No offense to Charleston Southern, but like a team that was just, I mean, yeah, like you just. So yeah, I think that it will take a lot to undo 2-10. I like Mike a lot personally. I've interacted with him at media events, non-media events. I've seen him at different sporting events around FSU. And I mean, he's such a great guy. And I think everybody really wants him to do well, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be a long road to get back and to wipe away what happened last year. And, we didn't even touch on this because I don't know how deep you guys get into it, but I mean, there have been concerns around FSU fans about his high school recruiting for the entire time he's been here, right? And you give him a pretty big pass on the COVID year where he couldn't meet with kids and he was at a new staff and all this stuff. But I do think that, if you don't get that right, which he, is trending up, but still not at a place where Florida State feels like they should be, all that other stuff that goes along with it, the reliance on the portal and, maybe getting comfortable with some of the evaluations and things. I think he's got a long road to hoe to get back. Not impossible. And I think FSU fans want him to get back because, first of all, they love their program. And second, he's a relatively nice guy that I think a lot of people like. I think that's kind of the worry or the concern. So I don't know. I rambled for 5 minutes about a question that I can't remember what it was at this point. But hot, I think the seat is relatively hot right now.
Yeah.
Let me add one more thing to what TJ said also, though. I want the fans forward looking to also understand, going back to my statement about the dynasty era as being over, it goes a step really beyond that. Parity is here. Parity is Vanderbilt, Alabama last year. Parity is here in ways that we have not seen in the last 30 years of fandom of college football. You better be ready for your team to go 9-3, undefeated national champion, and then 8-4, and then 12-1, because this is what's going to happen. It's going to be a series of one-hit wonders where the team comes together for one season, and barring injury, I fully believe Florida State was a national championship caliber team until Jordan Travis went down. I'll die on that hill. You have to avoid injuries. You have to get lucky. You have to find the right pieces for that 1 year to come together and win. And somebody's going to win. Look at how far Arizona State went last year, being picked to finish last. Yeah. Arizona State put it all together and put it on the back of their running back to run down everyone's throat. That's going to happen. And I personally think it's more exciting for college football. I think it's going to break down and eat into that power 2 mentality, but be prepared for your team to not have consistent win totals like they've had in the past.
Good point.
Well, so a quick follow-up question. We talked about the hot seat for Norvell and the potential for being a hot seat. I want to talk about the dynamic of bringing Gus Miles on it. I mean, you guys have been clear. It's Mike's friend. He brought him in. He's trusting in him. He's handing over the reins of the offense. But I just want to ask you, is there any chance we get into this season and the offense is doing well? You see improvement in the offense, but the wins just aren't coming. Things are happening like last year, which is not out of the question. We just saw it last year where second half defense falls apart or there's just mistakes and the wins aren't coming. Is there a scenario where a move could happen mid-season where Mike would get relieved and the keys would be handed to Gus just to see what he could do as a head? I mean, he's got head coaching experience, won a national championship at Auburn, has tons of experience there. Is that even a scenario, or is that just too far-fetched because the guys are friends?
No, not going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't see it. I think now they lose their first 6 games or something
7,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah, like, but I mean, Kent State's on there, which is last in the FBS. You've got East Texas A&M. You've got very winnable games at, Stanford, and you play Wake, and even Virginia is kind of a mess too. So yeah, if they start out 0-6 or something, and you lose the locker room, and yes, I mean, I guess that would be the scenario. I can't envision a scenario though outside of just a bigger train wreck than last year where they would do it midseason. I think, could they do it a week or two before, the end of the season? I mean, you go lose to Clemson by 50 and you're 3 and whatever that would be at that point, right? 3-8 or something. Yeah. I mean, maybe, right? Like at that point, maybe they make a change so they can get on the coaching search or whatever, but a lot of that stuff can happen behind the scenes anyway. And you can kind of be a dead man. I would be pretty surprised really with any scenario of him getting let go midseason, unless it's just, the locker room's revolted and you just it's toxic. But I don't think it would get there. I do think that character is a big deal for Mike Norvell. I think he would just kick guys off the team. If you're losing anyway, who cares, right? Like just kick guys off the team and roll. So I agree with Doug. I'd be pretty surprised if they made any kind of change midseason.
Well, first, the floor is 2-2 to start the first 4 games. I mean, admittedly, it can't,
Yeah.
it can't not possibly be worse than that. And if it is worse than that, then yeah, maybe there is a hotter seat than we anticipate. But you also have to add the second part in, which is Gus left being a head coach to be an offensive coordinator. I talked to him when he was in Atlanta. He loves being with his grandkids. He got to spend time on the lake fishing with his grandkids while Mike Norvell is back in the office making phone calls and making sure everything's getting done. There's something to be said for taking a step back. He's done it. He was in the national championship game. He's won at the highest levels. He's had every opportunity to put his stamp on programs. I think he's relieved in some ways in talking to him of being able to take a step back and say, you know what, I'm a hell of an offensive coordinator. Let me just finish out my career doing that for 3 or 4 seasons at Florida State. And I'm praying it works out that well.
Yeah, and on Doug's point, I still think this is very unlikely too. But if they did make a change, I think they would actually make Tony White the head coach, like the interim head coach, right? Like, I still think that is very unlikely. And somebody will clip that and be like, TJ said they're going to fire him. But I think it would be more likely if the offense is rolling well, like let him keep rolling with it, right? Like let's let Tony White, who I do think, I mean, this is not something you've asked about. I have a little bit of concern about Tony White. Actually, if the defense looks really good this year and they win 8 or 9 games, I think Tony White does want to be a head coach. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he was only here for a year. Now, I'd love to have him for 2 or 3 or more because I think he's a heck of a defensive coordinator. But I think it'll be Tony if they did make a change. So Gus would, man, I'd put that at less than 1%. But Tony maybe at 2.
That's accurate.
Well, great stuff. Let's wrap this up. I have 3 final questions. I'm going to start with TJ and then we'll go to Doug. So the final 3 questions here. I'd love to hear from you. What's your biggest strength of this team? What's the biggest question mark of this team? And then, of course, we got to hear both of your predictions for a record here. So TJ, strength, question mark, and then prediction.
So the biggest strength to me is the secondary. And again, there's a lot that goes into that. What's the defensive line look like? How much can they get pressure to make the secondary matter? I mentioned it earlier. You could have 4 Heisman Trophy winners back there or 4 Deons back there. It doesn't really matter, right? You've got to get pressure. But I think the best position group, the best unit on the team is the secondary. Pat Surtain has done a phenomenal job with those guys in both high school recruiting and transfer recruiting. He's put several guys in the league. Azrae Thomas is playing for the Jets. You got Jerry Jones in Jacksonville, Ronaldo Green's out in San Francisco. He's done such a good job with that position group. And I think they got more NFL guys on the roster right now. And so ton of athleticism. It's the position group that I'm the most confident in to start the year. And their play is dependent, again, on the defensive line being good. But that's what I like the most. And I think they've got a really good chance to lock some people down in the secondary.
So for me, the strength is I love a storybook ending. I'm passionate about fans, being a fanatic fandom. I believe the strength. I don't hope, I don't think, I believe and earnestly think the strength is the Gus Malzahn, Tommy Castellanos reunion. I think that both of them have been looking forward to this day. I think both of them are excited about what this means for each of their careers. And I really think that there's going to be an X factor there that it couldn't have happened any other way. Tommy Castellanos could not have come to Florida State without Gus, and Gus could not have come to Florida State without Tommy. And the idea that it just happened to work out in such a unique and storybook way, I really think is going to encourage both of them to bring out the best of what they have to offer. And I think we're going to be surprised at how well this Florida State offense actually shows up week one.
So biggest question for me, I like Doug's answer there. I hope he's more right than I am, because I do feel really good about it, but I would love for Doug to be spot on there, because I do think we're going to win a lot more games if Doug's right. Biggest question mark. This is such a cop out, and so I'll give an answer and a half. But to me, it's the whole team. The whole team's a big question mark, right? Like I don't mean that in a negative way, but projecting Florida State, you guys do a lot of, obviously Big Ten and other stuff, Pac and stuff, and the Mountain. But for projecting Florida State, they're the hardest team for me to project in all of college football, because 2 years ago they were at the mountaintop, no pun intended for the channel. And then last year they were literally like below the valley. And then there's 51 new players on this roster. There are 5 or 6 new coaches on this staff. Like, projecting what Florida State is going to be. We talked about all the starters on offense. There's like 8 new starters. That is really hard to do. So to me, the whole team is a question mark. If I had to pinpoint one thing specifically, it is how quickly that offensive line can gel together. I think that is the one thing that I want to know more than anything else. I'm fairly confident that Tommy has a good year. I'm fairly confident the defensive line figures it out. I'm fairly confident in where the abilities are for a lot of the skill positions. But if there's one unit on a team that has to gel together, it is the offensive line. They've got to truly be, it's so cliche and I hate saying it, but they've got to be 5 working as one, right? A wide receiver, if he runs his route or he blocks the right guy, that's all that matters, right? What happens on the other side of the field doesn't matter. But those 5 guys together, and hopefully they can stay healthy, knock on wood. Hopefully those guys can stay together. But it's how quickly can they gel, because Bama's got a top 10 defensive line in the country, right? They're going to be one of the best defensive lines you play all year. And you don't get a break. You don't get a warm up. It is week 1, throw you to the Wolves, go get it. So to me, the biggest question mark, the biggest thing that I'm looking for this year is how quickly can that O-line be a unit that's cohesive and played well together.
TJ and I were such a good pairing because we have such different perspectives on a lot of these questions. And this is another example. A competent offense can eke out some touchdowns. And obviously in the college game, you have to score in order to win. But we understand the offense has its hands cuffed, literally. Criminal defense attorney, make sure if you're in Atlanta, Georgia, you call me. But this is not going to be a prolific offense. So my question mark is, can the defense stand up to the 4 biggest opponents that we have?
No. Because
we're not going to win a foot race in any of those games. And I believe our floor is 6 to 7 wins. I think that we can show up and win 3, 4, 5 games just by stepping on the field better than what we could last year. With that being said, the question is those top 4 matchups: Clemson, Miami, Florida, and now, of course, Alabama to start the season. If we have any expectation for success, for exceeding our expectations, it's going to be on the defense's shoulders to make that interception, not break up the pass, make that interception, turn the ball over, get that strip sack. Can the defense do enough to interfere with the high quality offenses to keep these games close? Because to TJ's point earlier in the session, if Bama scores 2 touchdowns in the first quarter at Doak Campbell Stadium, it's going to be a long day, because we are not built this year. And Gus Malzahn's offenses are not built for 35 and 40-point games.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are going to get to predictions now. TJ, you get to go first. Where do you think we're going to be at here by the end of the season?
So hopefully I'm wrong on this, like I was last year too. I view the schedule right now as having 3 games that when you step on the field, you will absolutely win no matter what, right? Kent State, East Texas A&M, and I'll throw Wake Forest in there too. I have 2 that you absolutely should win, but the circumstances around both games give me a little bit of pause. You have to take a trip to Stanford. I think on a neutral side, or if that game was in Tallahassee, no worries at all. Traveling to the West Coast, things get weird. So that's a should win, but we'll see. Same thing with Virginia. I think on a neutral field, you beat that team 7 or 8 times out of 10. It's a Friday night in the ACC. Weird things happen. So, but you should still win, right? So if I start out at 4.5 right there, 5, you should get pretty close there. I've got 4 games that I can't at this point in the offseason see them winning: Florida, Clemson, Miami, and Bama. Not that it's impossible, but I would lean towards you're supposed to lose those games. And then, so what are you left with? You're left with 3 games that are coin flips: Pitt, Virginia Tech, and NC State. And NC State, you might even put towards a little bit tougher with our nightmares in Raleigh. So all that considered, if you go about 500 in your coin flips, you got 4.5 on their side. I mean, I'm looking at 6 or 7 wins is kind of how I project it. I think 7 is what the homer in me wants to say, because I don't want to project 6 and 6. And I know that would be a terrible situation for FSU fans to go 500 and feel like you're just kicking the can down the road. I think 6 is slightly more likely at this point than 7. Maybe I'm still scarred from last year. If they come out and lose to Bama by 3, I'll certainly change that around. Or if they pull off one of those upsets, then shoot, I think you could get to 8 or 9. I think 6 is more 7 than likely. 7 is more likely than 5. So I don't know. I'm between 6 and 7. 6.5 would, I guess, be my very Vegas line on that UNLV shirt. But I'll lean 6. I know that sucks to hear as a projection, but that's where I'm at. Doug will take us home, though. Doug will bring us some more optimism.
All right, Doug.
I'm the homer that doesn't have 2 other podcasts that I need to answer to the comment section for. I have a wild take that I actually put up on Twitter a month and a half ago. So I've got to stand in the paint and take it. And if I'm wrong, bookmark it, come back at me. Absolutely. Rohan Law PC. We love all the interactions we can get on Twitter. I feel really good about the Bama game. I feel like we're coming at them. Look, nobody gave Florida State any chance of beating LSU in the Superdome. And frankly, the game shouldn't have come down to a blocked extra point if we hadn't done a toss sweep at the 1-yard line. That should have been a 2-score win. And then, of course, we saw what evolved from 2023 with that team coming together and just dominating. That should have really been a 4-score game if it weren't for a late touchdown that LSU, eked out to make that game closer. FSU is the SEC killer. FSU is the game, week 1, week 0, SEC killer. They're going to step in and punch Alabama in the mouth and take the punches in the mouth and win 23-21 at home to shock the college football world, starting off 1-0. And if that happens, my prediction is Florida State starts the year 8-0, gets into the top 5, and everybody starts talking about, again, what an amazing job Coach Norvell is doing. But then the injury bug hits, and we lose that game in Raleigh that TJ is so excited about going to. And we end up 3rd in the ACC, missing the conference playoffs. We finish 8-3 after starting 8-0. And it's just going to be a heartbreak for Florida State, but it's going to give so many endorphins and such a dopamine rush to get so high early in the season. I really think we're going to catch Miami sleeping at home. And I'm excited for what the restoration of Mike Norvell's legacy is going to be, because then he can fall back on the injury bug being the reason for those late season losses and collapse.
Well, Doug is he went for it there. I would say I'm and you are the experts. I am not. I don't follow the ACC almost at all. We followed more lawsuits than we did college football when it comes to the ACC. But I'm more towards TJ's kind of prediction. I went 7-5, so I'm gonna go over your 6.5 there, TJ line maker. And I'm going to go over 6.5 because I got you guys at 7-5. I looked at the schedule and I went, wow, like this isn't a bad schedule, right? Like both in conference and out of conference. I'm like, I see multiple, as you said, TJ, like just you step on the field, you should honestly win the game. Like, and I'm with you 3. And you gave them kind of coin flips ish, and I'm like, no, I have you as dubs on those. So I'm at an easy 5. And then you mentioned kind of those coin tossers, and I gave you 2 of the 3, and that's where I got to the 7. I definitely didn't have you winning the Alabama game. So I hear Doug going 8-0 to start off. I'm not going to go that bullish, but I'm 7-5. And it keeps Norvell the job. It certainly is a hell of a lot better than that 2-10 that you guys had a year ago. Rights the ship, to some degree. Steve, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm not going to go with a record prediction, but I do have kind of 3 thoughts I want to run by these guys because I don't get a chance to talk to both of them.
I know,
together,
this is great,
so
right?
I got to run these by you. Tell me if I'm crazy. First of all, you mentioned Stanford, TJ. I think they might be the worst FBS team, or at least A4 team in the country this year. Been following them, and I'm an Andrew Luck fan. I love what Stanford's trying to do. They're going to be bad this year. I think you're going to beat them like a rented mule. And so that's my first thought. Second thought, Alabama. I'm probably closer to Doug. Maybe I'm crazy, but you guys were the big disaster last year, 2-10. Everybody knows that. But Alabama was a bit of a disaster as well. They had all the talent in the world. They had no excuses really, other than maybe quarterback play. They lost some horrendous games there. Yeah, Vandy has improved. They shouldn't have lost to Vandy. That bad Oklahoma team, when they had a chance to get to a playoff, with a win there, and lose that bad Oklahoma team. I think you guys can sneak up and catch them. I watched Alabama last year, the bowl game against Michigan, and Michigan was able to just pound it down their throats a bunch. So early in the season, this Gus Malzahn, and I'm with you, Doug, on that. I believe in the coach quarterback combination, whether it's a head coach or an offensive coordinator, and I think the 2 of them could be magic, could be special. So I'm with you on Alabama there. That they could sneak up. I'm not going to predict that they will, but my third thought is, I'll just say this: I'm not going to predict they will, but I'm saying we should all root for a win over Alabama, just because we want to see Paul Feinbaum's head explode on that 4-letter network that you're talking about. That we're not mentioning their name.
I actually think that Alabama game, I don't know. Again, I try and be somewhat unbiased, even though I'm a massive homer and everything behind me is everything's. I do think that we're either going to win that game super close, like Doug's saying, or we're going to lose by 20. Like, I don't see like that to me, that's what's going to happen. Like, Florida State either comes out like they did against Notre Dame in 2021, where they forced overtime, and obviously they lost that close, but where they either find a way to shock everybody, or Bama's just too much. I lean a little more towards Bama probably winning and covering the spread. But I think if it's close, Florida State does. Like, it's at home. It'll be dark by the time the game's over. I think that they've got a really good shot to do it. So, I don't think you're too crazy with that. The odds makers it's a tough job to do this in week 1 and know what's going to happen, right? There are so many upsets in week 1. So, yeah, I don't know. By the time kickoff rolls around, though, Doug we'll be hanging out. I'll be saying FSU by 30. So it'll be all us by the time that gets closer.
Well, gentlemen, hey, thank you so much for coming back on the Big Mountain, giving us your thoughts on FSU, where things are going to head. Always enjoy talking to both of you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us back.
Yeah, always fun. Thanks, boys.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.